Hey guys, Barry here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you all about the latest from A&P-REACTS, out June 19th on Century Media Records. The album has 10 tracks, 40 minutes in length, and this is the band's third full-length studio album. This is a very complex and layered record as far as the sound is concerned, but very cohesive from a structural perspective. The album is definitely not your prototypical death metal record, but then again, Vampire is not your prototypical death metal band. When you look deeper into the album, in my opinion, I really feel like you have to walk away with four main elements that really determine the overall presence, the overall feel that this record has, and that is structure, overall sound, guitars, and vocals. From a structural perspective, I really like what they did with this record. I really like the spinal cord that they created. It allows the album, like I said, to stay very cohesive all the way through. The record starts off with an intro track called Prelusion, and it bleeds into the second track of the album that's called Rex. So these two songs really become one. And this is the perfect way to get the album started because it really immerses you as the listener into the record. Next thing you know, without even noticing, you're already on song 3, song 4, and by that time you're completely immersed into the album and you really don't want to leave that ride until you reach the end of the record. And at the end of the record they have Melek-Taus, that's the last track on the album. And that song has an outro built into the song. So look at this. You start off the record with an intro track that bleeds into the second track, so they divided those two songs in order to create two separate tracks, but really feel like one single song. At the end of the record, they did the complete opposite. They merged an outro and a song together into one. So different approaches, same result. I really like that feel. I really like that way of thinking, that creative way of thinking outside of the box that really adds something. It adds a different kind of life to the way this record plays out. So that to me is one of the important core elements of this album structure and the way they put the songs together, the fluidity that the album has, and the cohesiveness that it has from the first song all the way to the last song. As far as the overall sound is concerned, this album really pulls from a lot of different influences. Early Metallica, Iron Maiden, Slayer, Dissection, Possessed. All of these bands really play a huge influence into how this album sounds, into how this band captured that essence of the early 80s. Different styles, different bands, classic heavy metal, thrash metal, death metal, black metal, all different bands with different genres, different approaches, but they're able to take a little piece, a little bit of all of those bands, of everything that they did during that time period, and really incorporate it into the influences that really dictate the overall sound on this record. I like that approach. It becomes really dynamic. The sound really expands. It becomes a lot bigger. You really don't have restrictions on what you do with a specific song. You could have a track that has perhaps more of a thrash metal sounding riff with a classic heavy metal structure to it, with some death metal approaches in terms of how the verses and the chorus come together. So this creates volatility. This creates an album, like I said, very dynamic, very fluid, but at the same time with a very cohesive structure that doesn't allow the album to break apart, to fall apart, to have songs that are not interconnected. This is a record that really has an overall sound signature to the way it's put together, but every song has a different approach, has a different fingerprint, if you will, because it has more or less of a certain influence that really dictates where that track goes. As far as guitars are concerned, I really like the sound that they have. Very driven, very raw at times, heavy when it needs to be, melodic when it is required. There is a lot of things that are coming from the guitars, and to me, the diversity of sound, the eclectic approach that the sound on this record has, it's really driven by the guitars. The guitars are really the ones pushing the envelope, expanding the sound, going into different arenas, going into different genres, pulling influences from different bands, and really allowing the album to come to life and be really larger than itself. So I really like the overall guitar work because to me, it's the main heartbeat of this record, is the main driving force of this album. And on top of that, adding some acoustic guitar elements to the record, to me was a winning formula, really a nice touch. It just adds something different. In some of the songs, it really brings a little bit of a somber mood, a somber vibe to the way the track is put together. And I like that creativity. I like that way of thinking, a little bit outside the box, trying different things, something new, and see what you could add to the song. How can we elevate this track? How can we make this track feel and sound different, so that you don't have this repetitiveness song after song after song after song. So I like what they did from the guitars, and like I said, to me they are the driving force that really expands the sound and adds that eclectic approach to the overall signature sound on the record. As far as vocals are concerned, I like the vocals. I like specifically how they're mixed into the record, how they come across in this album. It really feels to me like they're coming from behind the instruments, behind the music, and trying to push their way through in order to fill in the gaps that are not filled, in order to really make the sound a little bit bigger, to create a little bit more volume. But they always feel like they're coming from a dark place from behind it and pushing themselves into the forefront, not necessarily breaking through, always staying behind. The mix is really well put together on this record, and it adds a certain vibe, it adds a certain darkness. It definitely pushes this record to a much different time period as far as the overall vibe is concerned. But the vocals are really important. I really like what they did here. The tone is perfect. The delivery is incredible. It really matches well with the dynamic approaches that the tracks have. It really matches well with the overall atmosphere of the album. But the way they come from behind, really filling in the empty gaps as they move forward, to me it's an absolute winning formula. Specifically for this record, it fits like a glove. It's perfect. It's the perfect outlet for all the raw intensity and aggression that the album has built into its songs. Overall, to me, this is an album that for old metalheads, it will bring a sense of nostalgia. For new metalheads, will give them something to really scratch their heads and wonder exactly where you place this record, where you put it. So it's going to be an interesting record. It's definitely an interesting package that's going to have a different end result depending on who the recipient is. So I like that. It's a creative record. It's an interesting record. It's a record that really offers a lot of different looks, a lot of different approaches. And to me, that means one simple thing: it's not repetitive. And that's really what I want out of a record like this, out of a record that has an overall sound, a very cohesive structure. I don't want it to fall into that problematic area of having songs that kind of feel the same or sound the same. That's not the case with this album. As far as tracks are concerned, I would start off with Pandemoni. Great opening to this song. I really love the way it starts off. It has a little bit of an old school Kill 'Em All Metallica vibe to it. It really has this thrash-driven riff sound that is just permeates from the opening. It just permeates through the whole track. It gives this song this perfect forward momentum, specifically in the verses. The vocals and guitars really push the track together. You really feel like they're the driving forces. The drums are there, but they're just kind of setting the corridor in which the guitars and the vocals will walk on. So I like that dynamic, allowing the guitars and vocals to have more of a predominant role, really pushing the song forward. In the chorus, you feel like the track stops a little bit, not in a drastic way, but there's definitely a change in tempo. There's definitely a switch here. Like I said, it's not abrupt, but you feel the song it just slows itself ever so slightly. It gives the track a certain dynamic. When you have a song that has those changes from the verses to the chorus, you really increase the dynamic fluidity of the track, and that's the case with this song. The solo is absolutely phenomenal. I love how the solo explodes onto the track. I love the melody and how powerful it is. Great song, great dynamic, a song that really has a classic feel to the way it's put together, to its structure. Next, Rekviem. A more robust sounding track, definitely fast driven, melodic, raw, with a lot more power behind it. A lot of black metal influence into this song. At least that's my perspective when I listen to it. I really feel a lot of dissection in the way this song sounds and the way this song is structured. It just really comes across, not only from a musical perspective, but from a vocal perspective as well. The drums feel a little bit more fuller in this track. They feel like they have a little bit more volume, perhaps a little bit more heaviness in how they sound. They incorporate themselves better with the vocals and guitars to create a bigger wall of sound, to create a lot more volume, a lot more presence. You definitely didn't have that in Pandemoni. Pandemoni felt more stripped out. This one feels a little bit bigger. I also like the vocal nod to King Diamond towards the end of the song. Really nice touch. It really added something, but it also added a little bit of that black metal vibe that this song has within its core. Next, Serafim. This song has a more controlled approach. Still dynamic, is still fluid, but it just feels like it controls itself. It keeps itself together all the way through, from beginning all the way to the end. There are some bursts of heaviness, specifically from the drums and guitars together throughout the song, but that just adds certain dynamic elements to the track. It really doesn't break the track, and it really doesn't change the overall mood and feel that the song has. This track also includes some great melodies, and those melodies come in with incredible layers as far as the overall sound is concerned, allowing that melody to kind of come in and go out, and really allowing the heaviness that the track has and the more somber atmosphere that the song has hide that melody very well. It's there, sometimes more noticeable than other times, but the song itself hides it very well. It's one of those layers that gets just moved really deep into the overall mix of the track. A song that also adds a very slight touch of keyboards, really slight, not much. There's just one moment where you really hear the keyboards coming through, and that adds to the darkness that the song has, because the melody that they have is really a dark melody, and while they come in very quickly, just really a drop, it's enough to add enough darkness to that part of the song that just allows it to stretch out throughout the end portion of the track. Great song, really dynamic, really well constructed, a lot of different layers. Really, this is what you're going to get almost on every single song on this album. Dynamic fluidity from the tracks, great structure, great construction, great sound signature, very diverse on the sound approach, on how they mix the elements, but very cohesive from a structural perspective. A lot of different layers to it, both musically and how the vocals interact with that music. This is it. This is Vampire with Rex, once again, out June 19th on Century Media Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band. On the singles, use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.